Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. It seems that we can't get enough of the incidents that's been going on in terms of all the racial tension. One of our patrons has requested that I do an assessment on a video that was very similar to the one I did with Michael Knowles. The reality is that we're seeing a lot of people twisting and turning the issue that happened with Mr. Cooper and Mrs. Cooper in Central Park, but much less in the George Floyd case. There's much more uniformity about the egregiousness of the action of the police officer that they took. What is interesting is the motivation of the police officers right now is still not known. The motivation of what happened in Central Park is. And yet, people jump to one conclusion where it's right in their face and run away from it. And the other one, they run to a conclusion that it just seems more likely. And it's very possible that it's the case. We just don't know at this point. So, without further ado, I'm going to be speaking today about a video done by Anthony Brian Logan, where he explains in his channel about the same events that happened with Mr. Cooper and Miss Cooper, Amy and Christian. And it's the same video that he plays. And I'm going to start his video right at the end of where he plays the video. So you'll get to see the event again. Well, you're not going to get to see the event again, but you'll get to hear him describe the events again. And the issue again that he's talking about is the aspect of, is this racism or not? And we'll hear his assessment, and then I will comment.
All right. You saw that. You heard that. Now, CNN, good grief. I mean, you guys never cease to amaze me. All right. I can't even really say I'm surprised at this point because it's pretty much what CNN does. All right. They have a narrative and then they run with it without doing too much of any kind of research. I'm just one guy in my crib by myself, and I was able to find what really happened and some real context, and CNN couldn't. Maybe they didn't want to find it, or maybe it wasn't relevant to the story in their humble opinion. But
Anthony starts out by saying something that is true, and it's true of all media today. We are far from the days of Walter Cronkite, where it's the news is just the news. Most media today comes with a skew in their belief system and values, and they frame the story in a way that leaves the audience believing that their bias has no effect on the story, but in reality, it frames the entire story. So Anthony's skepticism in hearing the information from CNN and looking at it and saying, well, I'd like to know the context of it, absolutely is healthy. Healthy skepticism is something that we should all have. We all need it, especially in today's day and age where all the media sources, and it doesn't make a difference if you believe that Fox News, it doesn't make a difference if you believe in CNN or MSNBC, or that you go to channel 7 or 11, every single news media station today has forgotten what straight news is, and it's all the way it's framed, pushing a narrative. So the skepticism that Anthony shows is absolutely healthy.
Move on. Let's go to Christian Cooper, the black guy that was filming. Let's go to his Facebook page and we can read the backstory. And his post reads, Central Park this morning, this woman's dog is tearing through the plantings and the ramble. Me, that's Christian Cooper referring to himself. Ma'am, dogs in the ramble have to be on a leash at all times. The sign is right there. Her, the dog runs are closed. He needs his exercise. Me, all you have to do is take him to the other side of the drive outside of the ramble and you can let him off leash all you want. Her, it's too dangerous. Me, look, if you're going to do what you want, I'm going to do what I want, but you're not going to like it. Let's pause right there for a minute. Now, what exactly is he trying to get to here? And if you are Amy, what would you think right now? I was like, do what you want. What do you mean? Let's continue. Her, what's that? A logical question, obviously. Me talking to the dog. Come here, puppy. Her. He won't come to you. Me. We'll see about that. So let's pause right here again. Are you trying to steal my dog, sir? Now, you may not like that my dog is not on the leash, speaking from Amy's point of view, but you can't take my dog from me, okay? If my dog's not on the leash when it's supposed to be and it's a sign, you can call the police, park ranger or something like that. But don't try to take my dog, all right? That's illegal. You can't just take my dog, which is theft, because I'm not doing a thing that's right. If I'm breaking the law and you breaking the law, we both breaking the law. So, all you can do is call the police. You can't just, take my dog from me. But let's keep on going.
Now, Anthony makes a very valid point. He says, wait a minute. You made a statement here that I can construe to be that you're going to violate and steal my dog from me. And in reading language that way, you absolutely can understand where maybe somebody could take it. This is the reason why boyfriends and girlfriends should not have conversations that are important over text. It loses something when you just read words on a page. You could do exactly what Anthony just did, which is create another narrative that, wait a minute, he was going to do a dog napping. He was going to steal the dog from her. If you hear both accounts from Amy and from Chris, and in terms of her apology, there was no way in the world she thought there was any dog napping going to take place. There was no understanding by either party that that was the case. Even when Amy explains in her apology how sorry she was for what she did, she said, but wait, I was afraid of what he was going to do because I didn't know what it meant. What was the word she didn't know? Well, you're not going to like it. Except that she got to see it. You see, what happened was, the next part, is when he took out the dog treats and making the dog go towards him. Amy's response wasn't, oh my God, I lost my dog. She grabbed her dog and had him by the collar. Now at this point, if Amy wanted to, she could have leashed the dog and said, oh boy, let me get out of here. This is a situation that I don't want to be in anymore. But that's not what happens. Now you could make the argument, as many have, that Mr. Cooper, Christian, should have minded his own business, should have left the entire thing alone. What right does he have? Well, to Christian Cooper's point, he views the Ramble as his backyard. He views it as a sacred place where he goes to on a continuum basis and is preserving that area and believes in it. If you know anybody who's into wildlife, into nature, into something they care about, they take that as a very deep, spiritual, almost religious mentality. So his desire and devotion to that area and keeping it a certain way is very, very strong. And this is why it's very important to understand the context, not just only by reading it words, but understanding the body language and seeing what else is going on. That video told you a lot of information. As I was looking through the internet and seeing a lot of pundits, I came across Dr. Todd Grandy, who actually discusses the same event. Now, I did not see his presentation before I made mine. And I was curious, how does another mental health professional see this event? And it was exactly the same. Because all the signs and symptoms when you look at human behavior are exactly the same. And I was very pleasantly surprised, well, not surprised, but I was pleasantly happy to see that, because I was worried again, is as people are looking at this, that there's a tremendous aspect of bias. They're not looking at the behaviors. They're not looking at context. We're already going to the fact that maybe he was trying to steal the dog, which of course, there's nothing in the story or in the words that would denote that.
He says, I pull out the dog treats I carry for just such intransigence. I don't know what that word means.
Intransigence is a word that means basically, I don't need to follow the rules. I'm going to basically do what I want to do, and I don't really care about the systems. Just in a rough idea of the word. And the reason why that's such importance is that he's trying to say, I have seen this before. This has happened multiple times. I've now devised a way to help people who don't have their dogs on leashes to give them to go back on the leash. Because when I give them the dog treats and the owner says, wait a minute, I don't want my dog running around now without me having control, it forces them to leash their dogs, which is exactly what his intent was.
I didn't even get a chance to toss any treats to the pooch before Karen scrambled to grab the dog. Yes, she's going to grab the dog because it's her dog and trying to take it from her. Like, what are you thinking about? If I have my dog, I don't have a dog, but if I had a dog and I'm with it out there in the park, here comes this random guy talking about put it on the leash or I'm going to take it. No, I'm going to grab my dog. And matter of fact, I might pull out the pistol on you for real, because now you're trying to kidnap my dog, trying to kidnap my pet. So, nah, we're not going to have that in the park today, sir. But anyway, don't you touch my dog. All caps, exclamation mark. Yeah, because you're trying to steal a dog. But what are you thinking about?
Again, there's nothing that says that he's trying to steal the dog. But he is trying to make her recognize that she can lose control of her dog rather quickly without that leash. So the intent is not to steal the dog. The intent was your dog is going to not listen to you because the treats are going to be more important.
Do not want you to touch my dog. Don't touch my dog. And then he says at the very end here, that's when I started video recording with my iPhone and when her inner Karen fully emerged and took a dark turn. After that point, you see the video. Now, I'm not going to say she was right for calling the police talking about, oh, it's a black man out here. I'm going to say you're threatening my life, all this, that, and the third, because she's lying at that point. You know, she's not telling the truth about that.
This is the part that so many people seem to be missing. It was not identifying Christian as an African American to the police on the phone. It was identifying to Christian that he's an African American man to himself and saying, if you don't stop recording me, I'm going to tell them. That is the issue of somebody trying to control. It's an issue where somebody is trying to say, if you don't listen to me, I am going to show you. It would have been much easier for her to be able to walk over to Christian Cooper had her dog been leashed. I have been a dog owner, actually for many years. And holding the dog by the collar and trying to get him to walk around with her is much more difficult than a dog on a leash. And she was so entrenched in the idea that I'm not going to let you take any control about me. And what you have here, not something that Viva Fry talks about in his video about the idea of somebody being mentally ill, and not in this video where somebody is trying to stand up for their right for their dog not be taken away. What is going on here is a power struggle between two human beings. One who's saying, follow the law, and the other one saying is, no, I'm not, and you're not going to make me. And we're going to keep escalating this. And that's what's going on.
But it wouldn't even happen if you didn't try to take the dog from her. Okay. And then she was like choking the dog. That was crazy. It's like, man, I need you to do, treat your dog a little bit better than that. Don't try to strangle your own dog. All right. But I don't think that she would have done that if not for the fact that this guy was doing what he did.
I absolutely agree. Had Mr. Cooper just left her alone and let her dog run around, Amy Cooper would have done none of that, not to the dog, not to call the police, nothing. She would have left alone to her own devices. But that's not the issue here. The issue is she was breaking the law. He tried to tell her, please, ma'am, follow the law. She basically told him, no, I'm not following any law. I'm going to do what I want to do. He then says, well, if you're going to do what you're going to do, I'm going to do what I'm going to do because now you're not playing nice and you're not going to like what I'm going to do. It was not in a threatening manner. It was not to be hurtful. It was not to destroy. It was to say your keeping him off the leash is going to be problems for you. And if you see how Amy is trying to control her dog, it's exactly what happens. And that's what his statement was, I'm going to do what I'm going to do and you're not going to like it. That's what he was referring to. And it flows light in line in the context of the video. And actually, that's even how Amy understood it. Her decision to then approach him and say to him, while she's holding this little dog by the neck, You better stop. And he's saying, back away, was the aspect I'm going to control. And that's what she was doing, pushing control.
All right. Here's what's going on, in my humble opinion, just in a flat out, easy to understand way. The guy that was bird watching, the black guy, he was a Karen, talking about, oh, your dog's not on a leash. Dog's got to be on a leash. Matter of fact, if you want to put him on a leash, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Now you're being a Karen. Or even worse, she was being the Karen. And if you don't know what a Karen means, that means somebody wants to call the police and, get authorities involved for little small things like, a dog not being on a leash, that kind of thing. She was overreacting because of what he did. Strangling a dog, talking about, oh, I'm going to tell you a black man and you trying to harass me, because she may think in her mind that the police are going to come and be heavy-handed with him or hurt him or kill him or something like that.
Now, a number of things here that are rather important. The first one is, I'm not a big fan of the use of the word Karen. I think it's a horrible use of the word. It's disparaging, and it's putting down people in a way that are trying to stand up for specific things. In other words, what's important to you and what's important to me are going to be very, very different. You may not like me taking my garbage and throwing it on your lawn. You may find that upsetting. You may find it upsetting if I came to pick the flowers off your lawn. You may be finding it upsetting if I walked away with a chair from your lawn. And depending on where you're going to draw the line for how much damage or what I get to do to your lawn and your house, you may everybody here, in the entire world seeing this, will have different levels of where you're crossing a line. We don't want to be judgmental on where those lines are for other people. If it's against the law and a person is saying, I don't like what you're doing, and it's against the law, they should be able to stand up for themselves. It's really that simple. This was something that this man cared about deeply. It was something that he's seen many times. This is not something that's new to him. For Amy, she just didn't care. She didn't care to make her life easier by just leashing the dog. She didn't care to get out of the situation by just leaving. As much as she claims, I was afraid, the normal reaction when somebody is afraid is to get out of the situation, not to approach your aggressor. Very few people go, oh my God, there's a gang of people that are going to hurt me. Let me go towards them. It's let me get away. So this idea of playing on this was the issue. And again, correctly, what you pointed out is either she believed two things. One is that me stating this to you is going to scare you so much that you're going to leave and I'm going to take control. Or that she really believed that the police would become reactive to her hysterics so that they would arrest him, or worse. Minimally. So I don't know, because I'm not in her head. I've never asked her any questions. So there's no way to analyze that or know what's in her mind. But one of those things are very, very plausible. And the fact is, the reason why this is resonating with so many people, and the reason why I'm getting so much feedback about this, is because this is the rare instance where somebody's racist trope comes out. Let's just play this for a second. Karen would have heard, Amy. They call Karen so much, it's embedded in me. Amy just says, I'm going to call the police and tell them that you're harassing me. Or she just says, stop recording you, I'm going to call the police, and says nothing else. And he didn't listen, and she said that. You wouldn't know anything about her motivation. You wouldn't understand what was really going on in her head. It's only because she tells you that you know. This is one of the reasons why proving hate crimes is so difficult. Because in order for it to happen, the person has to tell you, my motivation is this. Or have a long history of writing specific things, creating that. So in a sense, you're telling on yourself. But without that, so you can have somebody just as racist, and you don't even know it because they don't share it with you. And that's why this is so powerful. As I said, in the George Floyd case, which is horrible, horrific, much worse than this case. But in that case, Right now, the motivation of the officers are absolutely unknown. People are assuming them. And they might be right, but they're absolutely assuming them. This case, there is no assumption. But people who are very intelligent are still trying to pretzel, maneuver, create this false level of equivalency in some aspect of trying to come to terms with, well, I want to go ahead and come up with a reason why these two people, we should just ignore both of them. But it's not equitable. And there's no equality here.
Maybe not kill him, but definitely be heavy-handed. Maybe she thinks that's a way for him to get scared and to get off her back. Maybe that's what's going on. Now, of course, they said in the video that she apologized and her dog had to get taken back by the shelter that she adopted it from. I think that's really just over the top because, I mean, did the dog get actually hurt? The dog was still playing around and whatnot. It wasn't like the dog was injured, really. The yanking of the collar was a little bit much, but the dog was not hurt. So why you got to get a dog back to the shelter? I'm not really sure how that makes any sense. And this guy does not really have anything that's going to happen to him. That's that black privilege right there, because in the real world, if anybody's going to be in trouble, they both be in trouble because he initiated it and then she overreacted. So
I don't like at this point where there's an aspect of, well, this is black privilege. There is nothing that Christian Cooper did that was illegal, that was immoral, that was unethical. You may not agree that he should have gotten involved. You may not agree about his choices that he made. But there is absolutely nothing to have been arrested for. Amy Cooper did the first action of letting her dog off the leash in an area that she wasn't supposed to. That was for a fine. But then she did something much, much worse. She didn't care about the dog's welfare and didn't care that she was choking the dog, so much so not to leash it. And then she made a false report that really should have been arrested for. And I got very upset, and I'll share that with you, when I heard about the police stating, we got bigger fish to fry. If you want to incorporate and hold people accountable for any type of racial or hate crime, and you want to take that seriously, then you need to take this seriously. And again, selective enforcement creates the feeling of unequitability. If you selectively enforce your rules in your house with your children, and children will then say, Mommy loves me more than you, or Daddy loves me more than you, and what creates is jealousy and anger. Does this sound familiar to anybody? When we talk about white privilege, or in this case here, he speaks about black privilege, that any time you're going to treat people differently because of their race, because of their gender, and that's another one, where not in this particular video, but in the past other videos, because she was a white woman, people have associated her emotional states or try to pathologize her, which is just as unfair. And there's thinking this is coming to her defense. Like, oh, let's call her mentally ill instead. And there's nothing here that dictates any form of mental illness. Basically, somebody can have a bad day and act out. Somebody can get ahead, dig in their heels, and say really horrible things. That does not mean that person at their core is a racist individual, but the act is racist. Now, whether or not there's a much more prevailing, deeper seated aspect here, that's only for Amy to be able to find out within herself. That's something she should work on with somebody to understand how she did, what she did, why she did, and what she can learn from it. Because there should be something called redemption. But before you get to redemption, before you get to that aspect, there has to be accountability. Now, people are very happy that the accountability came from the job and the dog. I'm not happy about that. It should have came from law enforcement. There should have been accountability saying, wait a minute, a crime was committed here. We are going to enforce it. Now, the punishment for this, for a lot of times, is mandatory therapy, where you'll go ahead, you'll get arraigned, they'll bring you in, you get before a judge. If it's the first crime that you've ever done in your entire life, then it's just basically Get yourself some help. Come back in a couple of months, you're on probation, don't do this again. And normally, it's enough for a person to look at themselves and go, wait a minute, I need to look at what I did here and hopefully make a change. The aspect of law enforcement always looking at it as a punitive aspect is not always correct. I have many people in my practice that would never have gotten help, have never made life-changing events if they didn't go through law enforcement first to deal with their issues. Part of the problem is when we only make it punitive and when we only see it as being punitive.
So they both be in trouble, but really it was his fault because of the dog not being on the leash. You want to try to take the dog, like right there, that's when you messed up. You can say, put your dog on the leash, ma'am, you should do X, Y, and Z. You can say that and have that be that. Now, at that point, she can't call the police talking about anything because he just asked you to do a thing that the sign says. But then when you go above and beyond trying to talk about, come here, pup, I'm going to give you some treats, all this, that, and the third, now you're doing something different. Now you've escalated it to a place where it shouldn't be.
Again, I happen to agree. It is an escalation to a place where it didn't have to go. But, and this is the big but, it's not illegal. There's nothing that was done that made it illegal. It is an escalation, and you're absolutely correct. But you have to let go of the fact that the escalation was one where somebody is taking something that they consider to be sacred by somebody else who's saying, I don't care. And the idea of calling the police and saying, by the way, there's somebody here without their dog, and think that in New York City, you're going to get a cop to come respond to you anywhere in the next 8 hours, that's just not realistic. And Mr. Cooper, Christian Cooper, I think understood that, which is why I don't think he's calling the police thinking, oh, good, I got to get another one. I know that when my driveway gets blocked and I have to call somebody to get here, I know it's going to be hours before, if the police come, it'll be hours before that car gets a ticket to say, okay, they won't do that again. But hours for that to take place. It is a low priority crime. And him calling the police to say that this dog will stop doing damage to this area is not really feasible.
It went from, put your dog on the leash to now, I'm going to take the dog and do whatever I want. Now, I don't know what his intention was. Like, what you going to do? Put the dog on a leash yourself or kidnap it? Like, I'm not sure what his intention was.
Well, let me explain to you what the intention was. The intent was, from everything that was going on and from his demeanor and what he was doing, his intent was to create the owner to realize that without the leash, you don't have control over your dog. And bad things can happen, like your dog start coming over here from a dog treats that you're not going to like. And it was enough for him to do that action to cause her to become more hysterical about it. And yes, I don't want my dog there. Come back here, come back here. But instead of her ego allowing her to put the dog back on the leash and say, okay, I got control now, she fought it tooth and nail.
But that's why people may react kind of strangely because they don't know what you're going to do. All they know is that you're trying to get the dog to come to you talking about here's some treats and whatnot. You're doing too much. I think the moral of the story here, beyond just Christian Cooper and Amy Cooper, again, no relation, beyond just them and their particular incident is that when you see a video on the internet, take a moment to pause and be like, what's going on here? What happened before the camera started rolling? That was my question. I was like, okay, I see a video at the end of a confrontation. What happened before?
And again, I absolutely agree with Anthony. The idea of what you always want to know what the preceding events were that creates your snapshot that you see. And I think that's a very important point, and I absolutely agree with him. I don't think here the previous events change what you see on that video at all. In fact, the context gives you a better understanding of what the feelings were and why what happened afterwards did. It goes in line with. But yes, it is very important in general to know the context of something before drawing a conclusion.
How did they come in contact with each other? How did they cross paths? That's what I want to know. I'm not just going to see a video and then make up my own backstory as to what happened. All right. Be talking about, oh, she's racist. She's trying to kill this man without knowing anything about what was going on.
And again, Anthony, and I think this is a very important point, it doesn't matter what was going on if she was using racism or trying to get him killed that would not make a difference, the previous part. The fact that he overstepped the boundary, even according to what you think in terms of him going on above and beyond, did not warrant any of those things. The idea of giving a dog treat to a dog, or to make the dog lose control, or even to get the dog to come closer, is not grounds to use racism or to want somebody dead. And there's no issue about him dog napping. So that idea is not here.
He was wrong to do what he did. He could have just kept it at, put a dog on the leash, man, please, thank you. If she didn't want to do it, you can call the police, park ranger, or whatever, but you can't try to be like, come here, dog. And then she went off the rails, strangling her dog, talking about black man trying to kill me, all this, that, and the third. So as I close, I want to say this. Like I just said, take a minute, take a moment to pause and be like, what's going on? Don't just react emotionally. I think she got fired from her job or, suspended or something like that. That's over the top. That's way too much. And when the police got there, nobody was there. So it probably wasn't that serious to either one of them. He doesn't want to get the police called on him, and she don't want to have the police involved. I think what also can be said is if it were not for all these virus shutdowns and whatnot, this wouldn't have happened. Like she said, the dog runs were closed. I got to take him here. I think it's further proof that we got to get past these shutdowns and get back.
Again, I have to disagree. The reason why Mr. Cooper, Christian, had these dog treats in his pocket is because this stuff has been going on for a long period of time. This is not the first case where he's come across this. That's why he has the treats in his pocket. He wasn't having his own dogs. He doesn't walk around just giving dog treats out. He already was in his place trying to protect it. And that's the motivating factor here. So it wasn't a situation where it was like, oh, it's because of the virus and because of these things. We don't need to create a narrative again that's not in evidence. The evidence is that he carried this stuff. Why? Because he saw these things happening. Why? Because he didn't like the way that it was hurting the animals and the plants and the fauna in that area, because those things have interactions between each other. That was his motivation. You may not like the fact that he stood up for something that way, and you have every right to that opinion. But he had every right, and legal right, to be able to do that. And it would be a much better world if we started to understand each other instead of giving each other the narratives and the stories. Let us not assume what is going on. Let's try to find out as much as possible what's going on and stop making excuses. This is the reason why in the court system and in juries there is so much disenfranchisement, because what happens is that when a person identifies with one individual over another, their own bias comes out. And I believe that one of the reasons why such intelligent people are coming up with really bizarre ways in seeing the event is because they have a preconceived idea about reality, and this challenges it. Here is a blatant racist act by a successful, intelligent woman. And instead of doing things in a civilized manner, she goes to the deepest, darkest place. And again, I'm not saying she's always done this, and I'm not saying this is who she is as a person. But in that moment, she went to a very deep and dark place and did something that was reprehensible. And it's a good thing that she was not a police officer, because as a police officer, if you do that and you go into that deep and dark place, people can die. And one of the things that we have to see is that these incidents are not mutually exclusive. They're interconnected and related. It's about understanding that. It's about coming to terms with that. And that, as a society, when we do that and we face it and we admit we have a problem, we could do something about it. As I mentioned in the last video, there are so many different things that could be done to be corrective actions to fix these types of problems. The nature that if anybody says, I have a problem breathing, needs to get medical attention, that would be a great start. Just that in itself. But there are many other things that could be done.
Life. But I think I'll leave that right there for now. And what say you? Who do you think was...
So Anthony then ends his video. And again, I appreciate the patron who sent me this. I hope that this answers the question about the assessment. Again, I want to thank you for sending it. I hope that you like this video if you like it. If you disagree with anything I said, please tell me. If you didn't subscribe, please do. And if you'd like to become a patron like the person who sent me this video, please feel free to do that as well. And again, thank you very much. Have a good night, good mental health, and sadly, I hope everybody stays safe and that we get through both the riots and the pandemics as quickly with least amount of bloodshed and death as possible. And I hope that we can return to a better time soon.